Viserys Death Watch. I mean, I thought he was going to get gutted in the wheelhouse at the end of the episode.
I was expecting
Right.
Alicent to just whip out a dagger and kill
because
him.
he has so been demoted. You can't really argue I guess I can't really argue he's Macbeth anymore because Macbeth is the protagonist, and Viserys is barely a third tier character now.
Yeah, he's fading.
Like for multiple episodes now, he's nowhere near POV, and there's no sign he's going to bounce back.
No.
There's even a moment when he's leaving one of the altercations at the beginning at the funeral when
He
he
super
says,
has dementia.
Yes,
He super
yes.
has dementia.
he says, "I'm going to bed, Aemma." He calls Alicent by the wrong name.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to get like a super insightful, his perspective sort of episode before he dies. Sort of like the narrative really focuses in on Ned before he dies.
Oh.
I don't think it's going to be like that. And I want to see what you guys think of this idea of kind of redistributing, re-rolling the dice of these analogs. I think the old Viserys has been sort of chopped up into pieces and given out to other characters. Like the last time Viserys was Viserys, when he was still declining health-wise, but a protagonist.
Yeah.
He spent all of his time worrying about legacy, and Corlys utterly takes up that cause in this episode.
Sure.
So I could see, I mean, maybe they could become friends, or maybe just Corlys becomes that role. He becomes more of a presence in the show.
Okay.
Because, I mean, through all the time jumps, he looks exactly the same. So presumably we're going to
He's
follow
doing
him
good. He's fine.
for a while more.
Yeah.
Similarly, Rhaenyra gets a royal knife wound, sort of like Viserys did from the throne.
Oh, sure.
And
okay.
I think that sort of reminded me of his early days. And Rhaenyra even gets her own Macbeth echo when there's a close-up shot in her struggle with Alicent of Rhaenyra's face and a floating dagger
Oh, sure.
Yep.
with the fire in the background. So
Yeah.
I think Rhaenyra becomes that character.
Sure.
And you could argue she doesn't have any kings that will come after her because her children are by this standard illegitimate because they're not trueborn. So maybe she becomes that royal dead end that Viserys was when he was
Well,
Macbeth.
I mean, now that she's married again. But for first, that's an interesting tidbit to unpack in just a second. More like Wincest, am I right, Maggie?
Good for them. I'm happy for them.
But first,
The happy couple.
in this whole Viserys vein, he's become a very tragic character because, in my opinion, he died that episode, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, whenever he had that scene where he was like, will I be remembered as a good king? Essentially,
Yeah.
how will I be remembered? That was him realizing that his, the time that he had to be a valiant king or whatever was done. His works had largely been accomplished, and there wasn't much more that he was going to be able to do. So that's sort of also when we stopped seeing his POV anymore. And what we're seeing now is sort of like the dying embers or the death rattles, the rasps of his life, with the few sort of manifestations of power that he's still able to muster. Sort of the outburst that happened in the chambers whenever everyone's in there, Rhaenyra and Alicent get into that fight. That sort of, to me, signaled the last time that he was going to be able to effectively sort of get in the way and stand between Alicent and Rhaenyra, because he's in such poor health. He's got the dementia set up from the beginning of this episode. Alicent's clearly going batshit about all of this, and now Otto has come out. And before, early on, we were like, okay, is Otto just playing the game, or does he actually care about the realm at all? And I think if there were any more questions about that, they've been firmly answered by this episode, where he actively encourages that nonsense, just the absolute lunacy that was on display from Alicent there. And so he's only going to encourage that. I'm scared of what Alicent is going to become if she already isn't that. Between Otto's influence and now Strong, what's his name? Larys Strong. They are feeding the crazy.
Oh, yeah. It's dangerous.
And it's becoming an echo chamber for her. right? Because she's finally doing something that people are reacting positively to, only these people aren't necessarily the ones that she should be taking cues from, right?
And I think she's going to feel even more empowered with Daemon and Rhaenyra's marriage. I think she's going to be even more like angry about her, and like she'll of course assume that she killed Laenor, so she's just going to feel more righteous.
It's validating for Otto. It's proof that the reason he was exiled the first time, he was in the right.
Yeah, right.
So maybe that will give him some sort of stock with Viserys in his final moments. You referenced that poll, Tristan, that we threw up earlier, which is the same one we asked last week, but I think it continues to be relevant. How will Viserys die? Old age, natural causes, or murder? And I think we got over like 40, 45 votes on this one, which is more than last week. People seem pretty animated. And I watched the numbers all day, and it just bounced back and forth between the answers. And it ended up being like 60-40%. Yeah, 60 for...
In favor of what?
60 for old age, natural causes, and 40 for murder.
That seems to be a change from last week.
Yes, it was... Yeah, and I think it's growing more likely that it's going to be murder.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, Cam, you said yesterday, like, the longer that he doesn't die of natural causes, the more likely it is that he's going to be murdered instead.